Hello and welcome to another episode of Untangling Life. I'm your co-host Andy Ayim and I'm joined by
Hattie Willis.
It's good to be back, Hattie, and today we're talking about boundaries.
We've deliberately, I think, got a bit more space on the sofa between us today. We're drawing a really hard boundary on the sofa.
This is our boundary, physical boundary.
Yeah.
Okay, in and outside of work, what does it mean? How do you set them? How do you respect and honor them? So we're going to get into that and more. But first, we're going to understand from our street interviews what boundaries means to our people.
What do boundaries mean to you?
Protecting your time and energy.
Being honest instead of people pleasing.
Knowing your limits and sticking to them.
I love those elements. And I think probably unsurprising that we've got some people very much approaching it from a personal perspective. What boundaries am I setting with family? Often a big one, but also that professional lens. And I think one thing we want to talk about in this episode is different kinds of boundaries that you can set if you're in different spaces. So if you're in a work, job context, employment, there are some boundaries you can't draw that if you're a founder, you might be able to draw. So we'll share what we see working for ourselves, where we have a lot more control, but also what we see working in teams and the role that managers and employees can play in co-setting those boundaries.
Yeah, I'd like to start with family first.
Oh, let's do it.
Yeah, because I felt like as soon as I heard that description, I thought about the family boundaries in two ways. One is because we've got an intimate relationship with our family members, sometimes, depending on the type of person you are, you can feel like family are taking a piss, but I can't push back. You know, whether that's looking after nieces and nephews or the parental tax sometimes of doing favors for your parents. But sometimes family time becomes a difficult one to push back on because they're family.
Yeah.
So I've seen those instances sometimes where it's like, you know, I'm always looking after, not in my context, but I'm always looking after the nephews and nieces.
Yeah.
They're never looking after my kids. It could be something like that, which is a really difficult conversation to have and not one you want to have, even though you're actually pissed and having that conversation with your partner.
And I think often it's this point of boundaries, we set them at the point that we're at breaking point. We set them in an explosion, right?
That's a reaction.
I'm so fed up of it. It's always me. Like, you're always asking, you're always putting upon me, you know. And I actually think often boundaries, we're setting them because we're just at our wit's end, rather than looking at it and realizing, hey, there's a pattern developing. There's a narrative I've got in my head that's making me unhappy.
In that moment, I remember creating a rule called 2 and 5. And the way that rule works was that 2 evenings a week, I could go to a work social, go and speak at an event, go and attend an event, socialize with friends, go football, go gym. But in 5 evenings a week, I wanted to be a present father and be at home for dinner. I wanted to be around the family. I wanted to be around the kids. And I've pretty much probably kept that subconsciously as a value and something that I've honored for the last 8 years. There's obviously exceptions to the rule, I'm in Ghana right now, but that's been a really good line that I feel like I've been able to toe because I was really intentional up front around what type of father do I want to be, and therefore that dictated how I want to show up outside of work and after work hours.
And I think also that intentionality allows you to communicate to people rather than being I don't like to do this or do that. It's I don't do that.
Yeah, and I think we can get in our heads sometimes around I don't want to come across in this way. I don't want to say it. But what I found is that it's attracted people more towards me. It's made them want to work with me more. It's made them respect me more, because a lot of the times it's one of those mirroring values where it's oh, actually I like that value. I need to do something like that.
Yeah, and I think boundaries are increasingly, I feel like it's a really mixed bag. On some fronts, it does feel like it's becoming easier to draw them because we're getting that behaviour modelled a bit more. But on the other hand, it feels like there are no boundaries. And particularly as someone who runs a company, it's so, and I hear all the time, they're kind of, well, should there be work-life separation? Is it work-life integration? Is it work-life balance? And where do you draw the boundaries? And actually, I find it so hard. And we talked actually a lot about in some of the episodes, financial freedom and it meaning being able to take time off work and not feel guilty. But often I think those boundaries bleed because of actually what we're feeling, not necessarily even the other person.
I think at the core of this problem, we kind of need to go back in history a little bit.
Ooh.
And during the Industrial Revolution, at that time, a lot of us were factory workers, manually working with our hands. So when we finished work, we would down tools, leave the sewing equipment at the table, go home, and there's a physical and mental separation from work.
Yeah.
Nowadays, because so many of us are knowledge workers, actually we need to be really intentional, because a lot of us know, like, whether we're in the gym, going for a swim, going for a walk, or in the shower, we can have ideas.
Yeah.
And work can be on our mind even at the dinner table. So we have to be really conscious around that. How do we open and close the door to work so that there's an actual separation from work and life outside of work? I actually think the pandemic made it worse, because we started working so much in this space called home that our bedroom became our bedroom office, our living room became our living room office, and therefore even that physical environment got eroded, and now is a space that we're so consumed with work.
Yeah, and we did a whole episode on environment and spaces, and actually we were talking about it afterwards, and I was saying, for me currently, it's the first time in 5 years that my office isn't my what should be my dining room table, and it's become this desk instead. So, okay, I'm trying to think how's best for us to kind of break this topic down so it feels really practical for people, because I think intrinsically we often understand the value of boundaries, but maybe we should talk about opportunity cost as a framing first, because I sometimes find that helpful.
Great. Did you have somewhere you wanted to go over that?
No, you take it away, Andy.
Okay. So when we talk about this concept of opportunity cost, we should probably explain it a little bit. And when we talk about opportunity cost, what we're saying is that whether you're conscious or unconscious of it, you're making a trade-off decision. So when I say yes, for example, to doing this podcast today, and let's say that this podcast is going to take me an hour, by default, it means that I can do nothing else with that time because I've agreed to this already. Whereas when I say no to someone who asks me to do something like feature on their podcast, it now gives me optionality on how I can use that time. Yeah. So that's essentially what we're trading off when we're talking about the opportunity cost. When you're employed, that cost can feel a bit greater because I may feel like if I'm not attending these meetings that I'm required to attend, or doing work outside of work in order to get my work done, it could impact how I'm viewed in terms of my performance, in terms of my remuneration and bonus, in terms of progressing through the company. So sometimes I go above and beyond, even if it erodes into my private life, in order to deliver. So a classic example within the workplace is that you have a day when you look at your calendar and you're back-to-back in meetings. Honestly, context switching all the time, you're not enjoying it. It probably gives you a headache at the end of the day. And then you end up doing work in your evening. Yeah. Because you couldn't really manage the day well, you're working in the evening, and therefore it's actually really a diminishing wage because you're doing a lot more hours than you're even contracted to. But even worse is eating into your private life, whether you have a partner or not, whether you have kids or not. It's your life and your time. Yeah. And that's where the boundaries get eroded, and the trade-off and the opportunity cost means now I'm working this evening.
I think I'm seeing it getting worse at the moment because so many companies have hiring freezes on. People actually, when people leave, there's no replacement, so you're left with a bigger workload and you're just expected to make it happen. There's always a threat of redundancy, so it's actually really scary to not be seen to be performing and grafting and putting in, be a team player, right?
Absolutely.
And I think you're so right as well about, I think one thing that strikes me about the opportunity cost that I sometimes struggle with is, opportunity cost, this idea that there are trade-offs, basically. This opportunity is costing me something to take. Yeah. I often find it really easy to think about like the negative opportunity cost of it, right? Like it's clear if I'm spending money on something, like what could I have spent that £100 on if I wasn't spending it on this? Right. Where I sometimes find it really hard to even clock there's an opportunity cost is when I'm excited by something. And often, I don't know if anyone else has this like shiny object syndrome. We love the new thing. Your brain is sparking with lots of ideas. And so constantly you're saying yes to things, either because they're all really exciting opportunities, you want to be doing them. And I think one of the ways I find it hardest to set boundaries is actually not even when it's as linear as like, I don't want to be taking a meeting all day so that then all day I'm being given tasks to do and there's no time to do them. Like, often we can see that, but that feels hard to get out for different reasons, and we'll unpack those. But I think there's also a separate thing of, if I love all the opportunities I'm getting, right, but I then am not weighing the cost of any of them because I'm just seeing the opportunity.
But what about when you're in a situation where there's two opportunities at the same time? Like next Friday, you've got an opportunity to do something for 3 hours in the morning, but there's this other opportunity that's equally as exciting that's going to cross over that time. So I have to decide between the two. What is the natural criteria that comes to mind and that helps you choose one over the other?
That's a good question. I think often I always find that easier, right? The kind of exact way up, because then I can say, okay, well, where's my energy levels at? Who do I have the higher commitment to as well? In what context have I shown? Like, let's say it's like two different social events. And,
I was about to say, it's really interesting that you don't use pay in that equation, but the social events is a good example.
So I'm thinking like, okay, I've committed to this thing, but I also want to do this thing. I will weigh up, okay, is this thing I've committed, like, should I stay committed to it? Because, actually it would really hurt someone if I bailed, or they wouldn't understand. Right. So I'm often thinking about it through that maybe more people-pleasing lens of like, what does this mean to the other person? But also I will think like, okay, it's the end of a week, I'm knackered, do I want to do this, do I want to do that? So I find that almost like that direct comparison easier. What I find really hard, and actually I want to touch on this with you because it comes to a kind of boundary setting I struggle with, and I think you're doing a really good job of, is the fuzzy stuff that I'm not making time for, that actually I need to be making time for, but it feels like it can move. And by that I mean things like strategy, going and looking at budgets, the stuff that's almost always there, so I can always come back to it. But actually I'm systematically not setting a boundary around it, so I'm not doing it because actually it will always get deprioritized. I don't have a boundary around commitments I make to myself. I don't have a boundary around commitments that I'm setting of the soft stuff.
The way I think this through is that there's a premium on our mindset and our thinking time as a knowledge worker. So our thinking, our reflecting, our creating time is actually at a premium because all of our IP ideas and value that we create comes from our mind. So there's a framework that I've used for like doing time audits when I look back in my calendar over the last 2 or 3 weeks, called Red, Blue, Black. I learned it from a friend of mine called David at dinner years ago, and it's always stuck with me. So red represents like costs to the business. Things like scheduling a meeting, like the time suck, but it needs to be done. Contracts, time suck, but it needs to be done.
And what would that be for someone who's in employment? I love this.
We'll walk through entrepreneur first,
okay,
and then we'll
perfect.
walk through the lens of employment slightly differently.
Okay.
Then blue represents revenue that I make today. Like I've got a workshop today that's going to pay me X thousand, and therefore that's revenue that I'm making today. And then black represents what we call like revenue in the future, and another word for that is strategy. And what you're actually doing with black activities is that you're making an investment today that's going to pay dividend and return on investment in the future. So a classic example of that is if I spend 2 hours doing business development, generating leads that turn into first meetings, that turn into paid work. Actually, if I don't spend that time today, in 3 months' time, I don't get that paid work, which is actually blue activity. So then when I'm prioritizing black, I'm not prioritizing it because I've just got spare time and I've kind of gone through all my blue. I'm prioritizing it because I recognize that it leads to more blue.
So you've got, and I think this is the interesting thing for me, is like the often I think when it comes to boundaries, we think it's about drawing boundaries with other people, but more importantly, it's about what boundaries are we sticking to ourselves.
Absolutely. And I love this quote by James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, around like, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. What we're actually discussing is a system. We're saying this is the system that I fall onto in order to honor the process that gets me to my goal.
Yeah, and I want to keep digging into that.
Especially when you have income goals.
Yeah, I want to dig into that more because I think there are probably people like me who agree with the theory a lot, aspire to be able to set those boundaries, but for different reasons. Some may be people pleasing, some maybe like it just all feels busy and like it's happening to you. Some maybe what feels like a lack of self-discipline. I've been challenging that narrative I have with myself a lot recently. But let's do the employment example first, and then let's come back to that. All
right, let's not forget that, because I already have something there around like honouring our time tomorrow more than just our time today in the short term. With the employment example, the reason it's slightly different is because sadly, when you're in a company, what happens is that when people look at your calendar, they assume you're free if there's not a meeting in. And they they never prioritize and think to themselves that spare time in your calendar means that you're probably doing work.
Yeah.
And it's a really weird situation, because they know that you're employed like they're employed. They know that they need to do their work at some point. So they should have empathy and step in your shoes and know that you need to work at some points. So at work, you almost need to time block yourself. You need to create meetings with yourself. Maybe you set them to private, so it doesn't just show like what the meeting's for.
Yeah.
And people respect it when you have meetings in your calendar, especially when it's private. So you almost need to create a rhythm of that so that you have space and time to think, reflect, plan, and create work. If I'm back to back in meetings, it diminishes my ability to make smart decisions on a consistent basis. So to have space and time to think is going to improve how I think, improve how I make decisions, and therefore improve my performance. And that's the correlation, the line to hold. And I actually think it's more the responsibility for the manager to be the visible role model, to then give permission for their team to honor that and work in this way. I think it's very hard when you're the only one that tries to work in this way, when you've got a team around you that doesn't, because your environment is like birds of a feather flock together, isn't it? If I've got 9 people around me that aren't doing it, guess what? I'm by default going to become the 10th.
And also like that, there's so much social pressure then that you're holding everyone else up. You're the challenge. Why are you
working different? You're countercultural instead of adding to the evolving the culture. That's why I love this concept of like cultural add rather than just fit into the culture. Because there has to be something that I saw in this interview about you, which I really liked how you're going to add to this team, rather than what I saw from this interview is that you're completely moldable and we're going to just make you like us.
Or even you're already just like us, and therefore my affinity bias is like, love you because you remind me of me.
Exactly. So if I wanted to take this back to my employer, I would first tell them to obviously listen to this podcast episode. Yeah. But then I'd also talk to them about like the fact that like, do you want me to be my best at work and do my best work? This is how I think it could work. Can we experiment as a team for the next 3 to 4 weeks just to see how this works as a team? And then at the end of that 4-week period, can we just discuss what worked well, even better if, and actually what actions are we going to take based on that? We're going to revert back to what we did before. We're going to fully go into this, or actually we're going to just take partial elements of this and test something else. That's the experimental way to soft load it and land it in a soft way so that we're actually trying it out and there's no pressure or permanence to this decision, which is what holds a lot of people back.
And I think, again, making the opportunity cost feel real if you can in that equation. So what are some specific examples of where overwork has led to underperformance in the team?
Absolutely. Like I do my best work in the mornings. I do my worst work at evenings. Yeah. You could bring that into the discussion.
100%. I also think the other thing is we often hide, we feel the need to hide the true cost of things. We don't want everyone to know. Well, some people do, some people don't, right? But often I think it's a kind of feeling of, oh, just crack on. Yeah. It's an expectation, and actually I've been in multiple scenarios where a manager hasn't realised that was happening.
Yeah, I feel like this even as a freelancer and entrepreneur, because a lot of us freelancers charge based on time. So when we're creating like a quote for a client, a lot of us say, oh, do you know what? Design time is going to take me an hour, and therefore what you're actually doing is getting punished for being efficient. Yeah. Because the reason that I can do that job quickly is because I've spent so many years perfecting and mastering my craft. That's why it takes me an hour. But actually, if I'm getting paid based on time, should I just say that it takes 3 hours?
Yeah, it's so true.
It's not the right model. And it's the same way with, like, when I hire a plumber to fix a job in my house, there's a call out charge by default. And then they might fix that job in 5 minutes and that quote is in the hundreds. But what I'm paying that person for is their expertise, because they solved a problem and alleviated a problem that was really stressing me out.
And also, like, do I want a plumber in my house for 5 hours? No.
Exactly.
If they can solve it faster, it's better for me.
Exactly. But that impacts your decision making if you're charging in that way.
Yeah. And we talk about this a lot with businesses, actually, like moving away from the time and materials based pricing to more of a value based pricing.
Yeah, outcome based on the perceived value to the client of this work. But also the hard thing is, like, we do a lot of work together, and when I'm designing a session for us or for one of my clients, that thinking time can be undervalued sometimes.
Always.
Not for you, but that thinking time can be undervalued sometimes because Andy's figured out a way to make it happen. Yeah. But it doesn't make it easy. And sometimes even the audience type, like we spoke about this later stage workshop for founders that are at a later stage, because the complexity of the stage that they're at, there's not actually many facilitators that can hold that room in the right way. But with the earlier stage, there's probably more facilitators that could hold the room in the right way. So even that has a premium to it because of the fact that it's a complex topic and a complex audience. So there's all of these variables that impact time. And sometimes I have this schedule in my diary of like deep work, and it's 3 hours, and it's in the morning because when I do my best work. And I might use that 3 hour block and say, in that 3 hours, I'm going to plan for this later stage workshop. In that 3 hours, I actually might eat some breakfast, watch some anime, go for a walk, come back, walk and think, use a whiteboard. And actually, all of that 3 hour block led to this outcome of me designing this workshop. But if I communicate that to a client, they might think, what do you mean you're going for a walk? What do you mean you're watching anime? What do you mean you're eating breakfast? But you don't understand that the compound impact of those interrelated things led to this thing that I created. The creative process is messy. Allow me to be messy.
And we don't have that allowance, right? And I think so much of what we're talking about with kind of boundary setting is like, first step, know how you work, and that kind of self-awareness of actually, does this need to be a hard or a soft boundary? Does it need to be a boundary at all? Some things we have complete flex on, some things we don't. And I think we're scared to express preference. We were just saying, I've just been booked for a workshop and I gave date options and I had a preference, and I was annoyed by the one they chose, but I didn't express that preference as like strongly, if you're able to do this or this, that would be my strong preference. I can make this work if it's not possible.
I wouldn't even given that other date because I really didn't want to do it. That's the hard that's the hard line actually. And like that third date, I remember that was the first question I asked you. Did you give that date? And you're like, I did.
I gave it as an option.
But this is why it's a real conversation.
And why did I give it as an option? Because I felt like I needed to offer 3 dates for some really arbitrary reason. I was like, magic 3, I can do these 2, I'll add that one in.
I think in the same way, by the way. I would always offer probably 3. I never offered 2 dates.
We don't even realise that.
And there's probably some guilt around, if all of the dates I've offered are like Thursdays and Fridays, I need to choose a different day for the third date.
Well, also, like, I've already offered 2 rounds of dates that didn't work.
So I'm like, even more pressure.
I don't want to keep back and forth in this is a bad experience. I'm going to.
But in that instance, would you ask the client, like, could you give me like 3 to 5 dates that actually work for you around these 2 weeks?
That would have been a better way to do it.
Maybe.
I felt like I was the blocker. I felt like they were going to do that and I was going to be like, I'm away. I can't do that.
But that's where I think you're right around. Sometimes there's boundaries, and sometimes actually it's a bit more difficult because you've gone through 2 rounds of negotiation where you were sharing the dates that worked for you. This third round, you really are trying to make it work, or you might not be able to make the work.
And I actually think I think we're touching on something here, which is that so many boundaries we build up in our heads of like what it's going to be to draw this boundary, and then you draw it, and actually it just kind of works.
Do you know what's interesting as well about my deep work example is that I just realized that time for me is fun and enjoyable. So I prioritize it knowing that I enjoy that time. But if I'm going into this marketing budget for next year and I'm thinking to myself, I'm dreading that time, maybe I need to compound it or sandwich it with other things that I enjoy and just create that block to say, in this time, I'm going to do these things that I enjoy and I'm going to do this marketing budget.
I want to come back to this because this is basically what my ADHD coaching comes back to every time. I have this perception that I should just be powering through, that it's a discipline question. If I'm not doing something, it's because I don't have enough discipline and everyone else does. That's the internal narrative. Right. And so what typically happens is I'll set in my calendar these blocks of deep work time, and normally put them in the morning because I know it's best. And I'll set these, and I often set them as really big chunks. Let's go and spend 2 hours in my cash flow forecast. Gross.
Then what happens when that time comes round?
I just move it every time. And I'll snooze the email, I'll move the meeting.
You're not allowed to move it. What about that? If you had to honour it, you're not allowed to move it.
Well, but the problem, and this is where I want to get at, the problem is it's a little bit like snoozing your alarm in the morning. Right? I can set a rule that I'm not allowed to snooze my alarm. But I set that as a wake Hattie, and the problem is a sleep Hattie then goes, I know I said that to myself, but I'm tired, I want another 7 minutes.
So how can Hattie shift behaviour?
And I think this is where it comes back to Hattie doesn't shift behaviour. Talking to that person feels very weird. If Hattie doesn't want to. And so I have to find ways to want it.
But maybe you just don't want to grow your business, and that's okay.
But I do.
But that's how we have to get to the heart of the root.
But I think there's two things. One is you have to want the outcome. Even if you want the outcome, you have to work with your brain, not against it.
Yeah.
And so to your point, so what I've been playing with, so recently I've had like a load of financial actions from my financial advisor that I've been putting off.
Yeah.
Some of them I've been putting off without even realize why I'm putting them off, right? One of them is like, I need to write a will. I own a house. I need to work out who gets the house.
Yeah, it's quite important.
Really important. And I put off for some very sensible reasons. And then I could now do it. I have the bits of knowledge I need. And I went to do it the other day and I realized I was like feeling like really stressed while I was doing it. And I was like, why am I was like, it's because I'm dealing with my own mortality.
Yeah.
I don't actually want to sit and think about if I die, how much should my brother get, how much should my dad get. Like, I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so what I realized is for those kinds of tasks where I'm trying to set a boundary with myself that I'm going to do them, I also need to set a boundary with myself of how I'm going to treat myself to help me do them. So the boundary isn't that I'm going to just force myself to do it at all costs. The boundary is, okay, I'm going to find that stressful. So to your point, how might I sandwich the tasks? What environment might I decide to be in when I'm doing it? What music is a great one. What am I going to eat? What am I going to smell? I'm very sensory. So actually maybe I'm going to light a candle for that task. Music is a brilliant one that really helps me. But or how am I going to make it more playful? Maybe I'm going to set a challenge. Maybe it's not a 2-hour stint. Maybe I'm going to go, you know what? I've got this list of tasks. 25 minutes. How many can I get through?
Yeah. And this one's challenging because you can't collaborate with someone on that. That's a really personal thing. Like you should do that alone. It's alone time thinking.
Yeah.
And it's like I say, there's two sayings I say to my daughter. One is the 5 Ps, which you've heard already, like proper preparation prevents poor performance.
It's a good tongue twister as well.
And the second one, it's like the only tongue twister I can say.
I love it.
Can't say that seashores one.
Yeah.
I said it the other day. But the second one is I remind her that often it's not actually a choice between easy and hard. It's been hard and hard, so pick your hard. So you have agency, but I don't want to fool you and say that it's between easy and hard. You're choosing actually between hard tasks. So sometimes I approach the day when I do the deep work around, I want to attack hard first because it feels really satisfying to get over a hard hill. And it's the same way I think about like when I run.
Yeah.
Like I run once a week at best, maybe once every 2 weeks on a weekend. But when I run, I do a 10K. And I think that physical action is very similar to my mentality around like I want to get over hard first because I'm picking between hard and hard, even though there's differences in how hard something could be.
And I think it comes back to that point that you made earlier about like it's an experiment. So for some people, I've heard the phrase like eat the frog first, which is like do the hardest thing first. For other people, you might need to build up a little dopamine supply by doing some easy wins first.
Yeah.
I actually probably do need to eat the frog first, but what I tend to do is default to I'm going to build up the small wins and then I get distracted by them.
What about chopping it up into smaller pieces of work? Like,
Also
you know, like
one.
how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Poor elephant. But agreed.
Yeah.
And I definitely that's a learning. And I think what becomes interesting is you start to play with what helps. You start to be able to draw better boundaries because you've now done an experiment. I know this matters. I know this helps. So a really good example is my calendar. I have a booking link. So if anyone wants to book me for a meeting, I can just share the booking link. It doesn't work for big workshops, but works for, all my calls and meetings.
I don't do that, by the way, but we'll talk about that after.
Mine is automatically set, so you cannot book me on Mondays or Fridays on that link. You cannot book me before 9:30 because I don't like waking up that early, and you can't book me after 5:30 because I don't like working that late. And so automatically, I can decide this call is worth taking out, so those hours, but I will only do that. I don't give myself that choice first. So rather than saying, here's all the offers, when do you need? I give them the call, they can book in. And then if...
And are they often... I want to understand the difference of the people that are booking through this link. Are they like entrepreneurs and founders, or are they like clients that want you for work? So when you gave that example earlier of you went through 2 rounds and then you went to your third, in that first or second round, did you give that person that booking link?
No, so I use it because for me there's too much complexity around when a workshop is, so I need to be looking at my diary.
I agree.
But I give it for meetings, the intro calls, 1 hour coaching sessions. I give it for sales or biz dev stuff, and partnerships.
Nice.
So any kind of call that isn't delivery.
Would you say that's the majority of your calls? Those 4?
Yeah.
That's great.
Probably about half.
Okay, that's still good. It's efficiency gains.
It's really helpful. But I think what's really helpful for me is actually I then mentally know coming into my week on a Monday, I'm not landing into back-to-back calls.
Yeah.
And the calls I do take on a Monday, I have a call with my content queen, as we call her, Kaz.
Yeah.
Every Monday to run through what's going ahead in my week, and that really serves me because I'm looking ahead in the week. And then I have a call with a strategic growth coaching group that I'm in, that I'm being coached on. So it's setting me up ahead for the week, and it's in the afternoon, which really helps. I've had the morning to work, then I have that ahead. And by default, nothing else. And then on Fridays, I have co-working time with my If We Raise co-founder. So that's protected by default, no meetings. But normally that happens from like 10:30. And so I know I've got a chunk in the morning, I can clear stuff. And then I'm going into my weekend having had this deeper work.
Nice. That's a nice rhythm to the week.
I love it, but it started with an experiment. It started with, I wonder what would happen if, I don't know if I'll find it helpful. Will I? And the outcome could have been, I hate having all my calls condensed between Tuesday and Thursday. It's making a rubbish middle of the week. For some people, it might work better to say, okay, Wednesday I need a break, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I think giving ourselves permission to play with boundary setting, permission to challenge the rules that we've completely unconsciously set for ourselves. And as managers, back to your point, if we're ever leading people or teams, being very deliberate about how we're not just giving permission, not just modeling it, but working through a system with our team where they get to test and play with what works for them.
Yeah. I think about it through like there's this concept I've learned from Dr. Benjamin Hardy around like, and he wrote a book, I think it was called Scale Up, but it's about like scaling.com is his business. He talks about this system of like ceilings and floors, and he says like as soon as you start heightening your aspiration for what you want to achieve, your floor actually needs to move in correlation to your ceiling.
Oh, I love that.
So because I've got these big lofty goals for myself as an international speaker, facilitator and coach, as a consequence, my floor needs to move in proportion to my new aspiration. So it means that actually for most meetings, I'm default no. And I'm starting from a position of no because I've lost that guilt that I used to feel when I would say no to someone that wants my time, which is how I used to feel. Even if that time was a win for them and not necessarily a win for me, it wasn't win-win. And now I'm in a season of default no because a small no to you is a big yes to me because I'm prioritizing so much of that black time. So a great example is like this year, I knew that I wanted to like rebrand and come in a different way when growing on socials. So I made a conscious decision to start a new Instagram rather than just like build on my existing Instagram, which has thousands of followers. And on the surface, a lot of people are like, why would you not just use what you have? You've got thousands of followers there. But I believe in like clearing the roots and starting afresh in order to grow new, grow new plants or trees in new soil. So I've went with that approach, and I find it so liberating and so playful to now build with intention over the next X years, getting to my 10K followers, my 10K subscribers on my newsletter, which is my goal.
I love that.
And because of that ceiling, now my floor's elevated. So even though, like you said, like on a Monday, I don't tend to have many meetings. I start with like prayers with my friends, and I go into like planning with my colleague Grace, and then get into the week. And then on a Friday, I have like sprint review, where I review the week, what works well, what didn't work so well, what would I do differently going forward. But from Tuesday to Thursday, a lot of that time is either in delivery or in designing and planning and creating and researching. And what I realized is that I missed being a researcher. Like I actually love when I have space to dive into a book, do research for hours, think through how I'm going to design an experience and be really intentional. And I know the quality of my delivery is improved because of that.
I love that. And actually, we're going to talk in a future episode about continuous learning. And I think that is it's going to be such an important theme.
Yeah.
We have to wrap. So, journaling prompts, anything that's top of mind for you? I've got a couple of ideas.
I think there's something around the power of saying no. I haven't got a prompt to mind, so I'd love to hear some of the ideas that immediately came to mind for you.
I think for me, it's breaking down. You'll notice my journaling prompts that I suggest tend to have a few parts, because I often think to untangle these things, we can't just ask like one question.
Great.
So I think one is, where could you experiment with something that you think might be a boundary that would bring you more joy, more light, more rest, more productivity, more efficiency, whatever it is. What is a boundary that you think would bring you more that you can experiment with? Number 2 is where you have a boundary that you know you want to draw, but you're really scared of the impact on someone else. what is a safer way to start testing the assumptions that are underlying that? Because often the fear is, if I try and draw this boundary, can you talk to a mutual friend? Can you talk to a mutual family member? How could you approach it so that there is a way to draw that boundary that feels a little bit safer and challenges some of the internal blockers that come up? And then third, how could you actively empower people around you to draw boundaries with you? So how could you give permission to team members, to family, to friends to play, to explore, and then come back to you and share those boundaries?
I like that. You know, the idea that I was actually thinking of was around like, and we'll link to this in the newsletter, but I wrote an article ages ago around time audits.
Love
which
time
walked
audits.
through that red, blue, black system.
Yeah.
And I'd love for everyone to be able to just look back in their calendar for the last 3 or 4 weeks and just color code what red activity did, what blue activity, and what black, especially for freelancers and entrepreneurs, actually specifically for freelancers and entrepreneurs. And just think to yourself, like, actually, like, what drained my energy and what gave me energy, and what do I want to do more of, and what do I want to do less of.
Love that. Beautiful. We'll send that in the newsletter.
Excellent.